let's get back home to talk about this. That's the Petroleum Industry Act, just signed by Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. Of course, it's generating the expected variety of commendations and condemnations from different interest groups. And one aspect that the new petroleum legislation that has gone into the realm of the political crossfire of the Nigerian Federation relates to the structure, ownership, and benefits of the new State Oil Corporation, the NNPC, under the new PIA. So what is President Buhari looking to achieve by putting his signature to the provisions of the new PIA as passed by the legislature? Let's mix politics with economy. I bring on the show from Abuja studio this evening, Professor Ken Ife, who is a development economist. He's joining us on the show tonight. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the program.
Oh, good evening, and thank you for inviting me.
Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much. The whole PIA, which is the Petroleum Industry Act, is becoming highly inflammable, going by at least over the last couple of a day or two since the President, Mr. President, signed this particular document. Give me your first word, Professor, on what you think President Buhari is trying to achieve by signing the new petroleum law, or PIA, as presented to him by the legislative branch.
Well, I think he wants to bring the governance structure up to date. He wants to bring transparency, accountability, and prudence in the management of this vital resource. And there are good news and not so good news about this. Let me say, which one do we take? The good news is, if we had implemented this 20 years ago, the host communities would have gained $500 million times 10, or times 20, which is $10 billion. If we had implemented this 20 years ago, the revenue, look, the FIRS says they expect $10 billion, 10 trillion next year. Can you imagine a differential of another 5 trillion? They would have had this times 20 years. So, you know, that is the good one. There are always contentious aspects of this, and we'll find time to look at those.
Well, these are projections, Professor Ken Ife, whether it is 10 trillion the FRS is looking at and what have you. Hold on, don't let us count our chicken before the hatch. So let's just take it very slow, because we have an implementation committee that will take about a year to bring us on board. They will begin to see how everyone complies, by the way, and a whole lot of vagaries that are still out there that we don't have control over as far as oil prices and a whole lot of issues are concerned. So this is my point about where we are right now, the whole governance that Mr. President wants to achieve. There are three broad areas to the PIA, the reform of the oil industry itself, for investment, for tax and what have you, which was part of what the FRS is talking about. Then we have the restructuring of the NNPC, the State Oil Corporation, and the regulatory framework relating to upstream, midstream, and downstream in terms of new agencies. Then you have the political posturings or questions now being raised around the NNPC restructuring. Who owns what? Who shares what? And how? Between the FG and the state line. Do you think the battle line is now being drawn between the federalism and the Nigerian government?
I don't think so, because the whole business there is a federation business. And all that I have seen is, apart from the upstream regulatory agency and the midstream, downstream regulatory agency, which are supposed to be there, then the new NNPC and the SPV vehicle simply says, let Murphy represent the federation. That's Murphy owns the assets, and then of course is going to begin to, the unbundling will mean some of the leftover assets are going to be probably passed over to BPE to privatize or whatever. But Murphy represents the 36 states and the federal government and the local government. There's no argument. You can't have an unwieldy board of 36 directors representing the government. How many will represent local? I think it's very, very unwieldy. So he's keeping it nice and tidy and clean. It's just like we have the sovereign, Nigerian National Sovereign Investment Fund is acting on behalf of the federation, and the governors are happy with it. It's no different from this structure. Is the
NSRA acting on behalf of the federation or on behalf of the Nigerian government? There's an issue here. We had the chairman of the Governors Forum, the governor of His Excellency, Fayabi, spoke this afternoon about the need for to practice true federalism as far as the new NNPC Nigeria Limited is concerned, the federal government would own shares under the umbrella of the Ministry of Finance. But they say they are not under the Ministry of Finance.
No, Ministry of Finance Incorporated.
Yes.
Is the arm that owns the assets of the federal government. On this particular occasion, there's a special remit for it to represent the entire federation in this structure. And it's just two clear lines. There are issues about what federal government owns, and then it's like RFA Mark is working on behalf of the federation. So I don't see the conflict. There's a very clear line that on this particular occasion, it is representing the entire federation when it comes to NNPC. But on other areas, it is about federal government. You have the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission representing the whole federation. You have Fiscal Responsibility Commission working for federal government. And then you have the state level Fiscal Responsibility Commission. So let's not allow political heat to, we should understand that this is as simple as it could be. And let's make a start with this. If there are finer areas that
it doesn't look like it's going to be as easy as it could be, because if you look at who owns what, the NNPC ab initio, until this PIA is put into operations, who owns the NNPC is a parastate of the Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources. So, who owns the NNPC?
Is owned by the Federation.
Yes, by the Federation, because
the NNPC is owned by the Federation.
Because there's a contribution which it makes regularly to the FAC, monthly FAC allocation. So the point is that will the NNPC still be making monthly point? Yes, yes. Please go ahead, Prof.
No, it will change. New NNPC will only collect 10% of the revenue of the new vehicle, and that's all that they will have to use to run themselves. It's just like FIRS, it's just like customs. They collect a certain percentage of the money they collect as their own service charge. That's what it's going to be running. FIRS will go and collect money on behalf of the federation and then bring it there for them to share. This is what it is. But people are heated up right now and they can argue anything, but that is what it is.
Prof, do you think the PIA is a perfect document or a work in progress?
It is a work in progress and is a necessary one. We've had these arguments during the Abacha regime, and where we are looking at is it should be 50% or 20%. Eventually, we started at 13.5%, and the temperature has cooled. And then we are now moving on and adding other things to it. We are adding so many other little things to it. Now we are starting with 3% of host community and affected community, and then gradually, it only takes every year we have Finance Act. We will use the Finance Act of 2022-2023 to smoothen any rough edges as we go along. And it's going to be a learning curve. We can't wait anymore. We've waited for over 20 years for this to happen, and we should just take it, one at a time.
One at a time.